Hello, peace, and thank you once again for tuning in to this fourth in the four-part series of the reading, the full text of Tomorrow Will Answer Tomorrow Will Answer Horror and Hope in Palestine by Palestinian historian Muhammad Jihad Ismael. To return to our text, what do you see ahead in this war's aftermath? I foresee a worse version of our 17-year normal imprisonment. Chaos, suicides, mental disorders, hunger and untreated illness, increasing crime and civil war, and cancer, because Israel has poisoned the land, water, and the air with tons of explosives, toxic residues. Even the few fruits of trees, herbs, and vegetables that at times sustained us will be inedible. In the endless rubble, you have to imagine decades for any effort to rebuild. So, without some kind of radical new peace based in the end of apartheid, it means that more generations will grow up in tense and constant deprivation with no horizon of hope. History just keeps repeating itself because our so-called leaders refuse to learn. They are addicted to the status quo. 25. Do you think Hamas will still rule Gaza after the war? What about the Palestinian Authority or other indigenous movements or organizations? If we remember the core Israeli goal of exclusive possession of all the land, there may be no more Palestinian Gaza. This war clearly intends to drive West Bank people out too, using Israel's internal army of armed fanatic settlers. We live each day in the shadow of total removal. Indeed, that was one choice facing Canaanite Philistine towns when the Israelites first invaded. We could be their slaves, we could leave, or we could die, and in any case, they would facilitate. Some reportage says Hamas cannot be defeated, but I explained their worsening weakness. Among our people, Hamas will not last 6 months without outside help like Iran's. Perhaps the IDF will leave them the pistols, handcuffs, and batons they need to go on in tyranny over us. That might suit Netanyahu and his good US and EU friends, quietly investing always in a strong Hamas to split us off from our kinsmen under the PA. Now, if Hamas is somehow destroyed, why would we want more kleptocracy under PA thugs, thieves, and traitors? The PA murdered Arafat and looted the Palestinian National Fund. There are no real controls built into their foreign funding, so it never reaches our people. Indeed, President Abbas murderously collaborates with apartheid. He is in fact Qatari and loyal to them. And back in 2005, it was Abbas who decided to transfer governmental administration from Gaza to the West Bank. So Hamas rushed quick into the void, and in 2007, Abbas kept his 38,000 Gaza soldiers in their homes while Hamas staged their coup. His 2005 election was the last time Palestinians were allowed to vote. We liken him to a can of putrefying beans. One other organization, Islamic Jihad, blindly shares traits of their ally, Hamas, and depends on them for support of their families. Jihad has no interest in or chance of becoming a government. They were once large and powerful, but their Marxist-influenced PFLP is marginal and ineffective now, a similar swamp of corruption. As we noted, the religious fantasists guiding them, most Palestinians have no need or desire for more. In sum, even if we do somehow remain here without open, fair elections for a new united people's choice of leadership, composed of qualified independents and technocrats, no plan for a feasible future can even begin. All these oppressive addicts of the status quo have blocked such elections for 19 years. Not even a peacekeeping force from Arab countries could work because we have had enough of foreign occupation. 27. Speaking of occupation, Some argue that Israel itself is just a vanguard military base to protect Western interests in the Middle East. I disagree. I know that Joe Biden said long ago that if there were no Israel, we would have to create it. But as usual, he is shallow and confused. First, the oil-dependent West has long maintained numerous military bases in lands across our region, not to mention their fleets of warships, puppet regimes, subverted embassies, loyal agents, and disinformation media. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed in World War I, the West mostly redrew our political maps to divide our transnational family relations and keep control. Also, before 1948 created Israel, both of World War II's Axis and Allied powers prioritized victory here. For all that, the Zionist vision of Israel has roots much deeper than Western interests, in Jewish and Christian heritage still visible, for example, in the ruined castles of crusaders. Those roots are part of why Israel is so often disloyal to the West and America's kid glove demands. So, yes, Israel depends upon the West, but the West does not depend absolutely on Israel. 28. As we look further toward the future of this conflict, do you believe in peace and perhaps a two-state solution? First, consider one state. I believe in peaceful Palestinian-Jewish coexistence because we have already lived it for centuries. For example, in my grandparents' typically multicultural town, Shaphir, long before the word state came into discussion. A state needs borders, artificial constructs that enforce separation, but we all lived imperfectly together in the region named Palestine on Golda Meir's first passport. If a new joint name, including Israel, helps regional peace, then why not? Let everybody vote for the name they want. Those pre-1948 realities we also see in the slogan, "From the river to the sea." As a region of that description, we were, in a sense, one state of equal individuals. Now, both sides corrupt that ideal. Some of Hamas use it to mean the end of Israel, and Israel's racist Likud members drive the ethnic cleansing and genocide behind that phrase in their charter. Why surrender our ancient and common future to a minority of deluded fanatics on both sides? They all depend on our separation. A two-state solution makes monuments to the lie that we cannot live together with equal justice. All our elders know that we already have, and the many obstacles that compromise betray it is now impractical. Look at just some of them. The era of Israel's fake peace process enabled the so-called settlements that have now de facto ended hope for any contiguous state of Palestine. The map for little Jared Kushner's vision for peace included a subterranean tunnel between Gaza and the West Bank, so Israelis would not have to see us in travel. Neither side thinks anymore about adjusting the United Nations borders of 1967. Netanyahu's racist ministers, Mrs. Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and others, are driving to make occupation de jure, the word of law that renames the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, parts of the Israeli state, and international law be damned. Meanwhile, plans begin for new Gaza settlements and real estate deals. Short of some inconceivable land exchanges, I doubt this can go on without a full catastrophe for both our peoples. The rulers now are weapons, wounds, money, and utter frustration. As Israel's journalist Gideon Levy puts it in his lecture, The Zionist Tango, on YouTube, what settler so invested in a West Bank house believes in an end to occupation? To the question then, I believe in peaceful coexistence, and I doubt that either of two states will accept the dubious compromises of building them. 29. So it seems we are left with a struggle of arms. Your views? I am not against armed resistance to invasion and being colonized. I have praised resistance in my works, for example, the martyr Khalil al-Wazir or Abu Jihad. The point, however, is that for any society with a real morality, War and bloodshed are never the first or only options. The lie that we are sold is there is no choice. It is an Israeli motto, but self-serving Hamas fanatics say it too. These days, I see meticulous historical studies declare that nonviolence is futile. Yet, look at our condition now. We're dying en masse for worse than nothing and losing our souls in the process. For me, the Oslo Accords of 1993 were a crucial turning point. Before then, arms resistance was based in diaspora and Palestinian territories were occupied. Afterward, with those places under putative self-government, armed resistance happened right in the jaws of Israel. With the Quran, I think a just violence only defends your home and family. Your offense is in diplomacy, politics, and nonviolent actions. Under international law, Palestinians have the right of resistance to occupation, quote, by any means necessary, unquote. And the occupier has no right to self-defense in commission of a crime. As Nelson Mandela observed, the occupier's denials implicitly decide what becomes necessary for justice. Who commits a crime is the one responsible for it. The same goes against Hamas, whose October 7th was not resistance, but terrorism, meaning violence against civilians for a political goal. We cannot let terrorism be the lawyer for Palestine's just cause. 30. Let us close with a very big question. In the Gaza of 2018, we saw Israel's answer to nonviolent Palestinian protest. Those who insist on a greater Israel are as dedicated as Palestinians to what they believe are their rights. Is there any path to a peace that lets both sides live as who they are? You ask me to climb the last hill and see the land of milk and honey. I can only share what my observations, research, and best understanding suggest. As a Palestinian with eyes and ears, I know that most of our people want peaceful coexistence achieved by non-violence. This was the spirit of their Great March of Return in 2018, and Hamas had no part in it, not until the second day began, when they and Jihad planted snipers among the crowds and, yes, killed not a few IDF soldiers. We must have honest accounts of what happened. When Israelis responded with snipers, then too came the slings and throwing of stones, the hurling of iron construction bars, even balloons of fire that burned Israeli farmland. Hamas also used the march to reconnoiter the border for the plan of October 7th. They exploited and wrecked the march's first aim. And finally, when they forced their green flags into television clips of the mourners at 2018 funerals, this to our families was the height of illegitimacy, just like Hamas's righteous forbiddance or destruction of pre-Muslim Palestinian heritage. What is it to be Palestinian? It means that we are the living inheritors of all the traditions that have named and shaped this land, an archaeology of 9,000 years. Curiously, Israel's own best digs reveal wave after wave of immigrants here, from the first Natufians to Canaanites, Edomites, Philistine sea peoples who named this land Palestine, and to Hebrews and Israelites. Palestine embraced the earliest Hebrews, sharing life from agriculture and trade to some religious practices. They were all, as the digs say, entangled in the normal human affairs of coexistence. The Torah, too, includes hybrid names born of family intermarriages. Yet under the new law of separation from the latecomer Highland Israelites, who did not trade even with their Midland Hebrew cousins, entanglements like marriage had to end. After all, it facilitated coexistence, and such is the law again in Israel today. This is the ignorant ground for Israel's paranoid hostility toward Iran as their peer and neighbor. It may surprise that I have no problem with a Zionism that means Jewish nationalism, as long as we too have a state. But I oppose all separation, racism, and expansionism. From there, we must notice that Greater Israel is rooted in a right of conquest. We once believed in the Torah's tales of Joshua's campaigns, then archaeology disproved them, and yet now, if you put the best datings of destructions of Canaanite Philistine places in time order, you see that only about 200 years transformed them all into the first state of Israel. So we come to the crucial word, legitimacy. One cannot argue that the Israelite conquest of Palestine erased all indigenous rights, for how then did Israel's legitimacy survive their own conquerings in turn by Assyria, Babylon, the Romans, and others? We begin to see the difference between demonstrable attachments to the land, which both sides can show to different degrees, and a grandiose neurotic protest that only certain people deserve exclusive possession and expansion. Yet the Torah and its child apartheid Israel now dream of taking Sinai as a land so key to their ancestors, Jordan as the land of their tribes Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, southern Lebanon as the inheritance of Asher and Naphtali, and southern Syria as lands of Manasseh too. Those who believe in exclusive rights and expansion against other human beings must intend their violent subjugation. Israel's most desired goal of legitimacy, however, cannot rest upon violence. For me, the secret of an honorable legitimacy hides in plain sight. Look at the two simple paragraphs of 1917's Balfour Declaration, which Israel venerates like Holy Writ. The first condones an Israeli state on the condition in the second paragraph, quote, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, unquote. So it seems clear that their true legitimacy is a long way off. First, there must be a rigorous reckoning that dismantles apartheid and repairs so many hideous mistakes. Is this impossible for Israelis? I see their spiritual strength, and I do not think so. In closing, let me point to the counsel of Israel's distinguished journalist Richard Ben Kramer. In Hebrew, he says, there is a verb, lakshot, which means their tradition of fearless, relentless interrogation of facts toward genuine truth. Is there any more honorable application of learning? Such a self-interrogation, Kramer says, would make Israel more Jewish, not less, and that is no threat to Palestine. If they can do it, so can we. As a poet said, the ego blames, but the soul forgives. All we see now is the mutually murderous futility of trying to build a real world on maleducation, falsehoods, and addictive hypocrisy. I thank you for these questions. Thank our listeners and readers too for this chance to be heard. Every single person has a stake in the resolution of this conflict, because if you will not act to foster justice for everybody, you can only be sure that each day fewer people will act toward justice for you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much on behalf of myself and Muhammad Ismael for your listening and your thoughtful attention to these matters. This is the end of part 4 of 4. I want to repeat, Muhammad welcomes your responses. Please click in more information here on the GoFundMe link that with only $10 from you could directly help Muhammad and his family to emigrate to a life of future hope. Finally, please do look for new programs on this channel featuring Muhammad talking about this work and other rich Palestinian subjects. We wish peace for everyone. We are the enemies of no one. Justice can only lead to peace, as it must do. We thank you very much.